I-
Is Peter ready?
Wait, no, let's make the motion and we can,
Peter, you all
Motion, we
set?
go back into regular session.
Second.
okay, vote.
Alan Dunham says aye.
Sarah recused herself. I recused myself.
Ron Clark says aye.
Helen Maroney says aye.
Kinda, sorta.
Okay, we're back in regular session. Would you like to join me in the salute to the flag?
Pledge allegiance.
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clark, would you graciously do a prayer for us?
Almighty God, humbly we pray your blessing as we concern our life with the opportunity to serve our community. Enhance us with your spirit of dignity and selflessness. May we become instruments of support and understanding as we seek to bring an environment of trust and purpose among all who provide the many services that make us all that we can become. Help us achieve the goals of our commitment in this office that is now our responsibility. And especially, we lift our prayers for all the citizens of our community that we have been allowed to serve, that they may discover the fullness and joy of life that we all seek. And keep those serving in our armed forces and our first responders in our hearts and thoughts. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Okay, quick review of the agenda. Agenda items, we just went through the executive session. First at 7:30, 7:35, we're supposed to meet with the governance committee. I guess we'll adjust the
Kinda blew-
time on that.
Because they kinda blew past that one.
The town administrators, discussion and vote on the town department budgets, discussion and vote on the draft warrants. Board of the Selectmen's comment period, minutes, licenses, topics not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of the meeting, minutes of March 24th, public comment period, and executive session at, won't be 9 o'clock, that's for certain.
So, Mr. Chair, as I think we discussed a little bit earlier, perhaps we should take off this last executive session. Since we got advice from town council on having the discussion next be an open session.
Okay, the advice from town council was that if we're gonna deal with the evaluation of our town administrator, that has to be listed as such on our agenda, which we have not. So,
We'll have to take it up at our next meeting then, since we didn't advertise the discussion.
The open discussion, right, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I have some clarification here. So, you're saying that we have to, in open session, go over everybody's comments?
No.
No.
No,
Or just the
advice-
review?
The advice that Dave Jenkins gave Michael and Dick on March 30th basically said there were 3 stages of this. We've done the first stage. Those are our notes, and those are not for public view. The next stage is, and you correct me if I get this
you're
wrong.
going good.
The next stage is an open session where we discuss in general, good and bad.
Each of us would make some
Points.
comments about how we did our evaluation, just whatever we want to say.
But very
Michael
ge-
will say something in return, and then
No, actually, I spoke with David Jenkins today, and he said if we could talk about the evaluations in general, but they had to stay very general. It didn't have to be focused on just 4 questions, but it did have to remain very general.
Sorry, I
No.
didn't mean to interrupt.
Nope, Bill.
Does Mr. Jenkins realize that we have not finalized the evaluation?
That's the 3rd stage, he said. In this email that Dick handed out to all of us, he does point out that then the 3rd stage then is back in executive session, at which point we summarize.
Do a collective summary,
Correct.
Ellen, then.
So really, the next phase that we have to do is just publicly, each of us speak to the evaluation in
Correct.
general terms as we approached it.
Correct.
Michael can say something he might want to say, and then we finish it off by just finalizing the final summary.
Correct. And Dave Jenkins couldn't give us that in writing today because he was driving, but I will try to get him to put what he told me today.
I mean,
in
we've got the
writing.
bulk of everything done, so
Right.
it's just.
Right,
It's
right.
just summarize it.
So what you're telling me is we don't have an executive session. That's the
Because the
good
next
news.
move is to be in
Well,
open session.
I want you to vote that.
Well,
Well, we can't. We can't do it, otherwise we'll be in violation of the open meeting law.
Right.
Okay.
Very
Okay.
often, we advertise an executive session and then often don't
Right.
need it, so.
Okay, good?
The
All right.
executive session is for multiple topics, so the only
Yeah.
thing you're not gonna do, and you wouldn't vote, is the part in parentheses, in the third line in the middle.
So is there need for an executive session or not?
I would think where
Know what
we.
we wanna
I-
hear.
where- I would think where we, unless you have something else that needs to go there, I mean,
The
considering
other
the work we
executive
just
session
did.
We could wait to Tuesday.
Oh,
given that
amen.
yes, we can wait to Tuesday for the other item.
Amen.
Okay.
There's no need for an executive session at 9 o'clock.
Okey doke. Nine.
Okay.
People say he doesn't have the ability to pick up on signals.
Okay, all right, so let's go on to public comment period related to the agenda. Do we have anybody? Okay, onward and upward. And our governance committee has been patiently sitting, waiting for their presentation. Before they come up, I would like very much to thank them for all their hard work. I was a member of the governance committee until last September, worked with the four members of the committee, Steve Gray and Jim Grimes and Jack Angley and John
Carter.
Carter. You get to my age, you have these blocks. Anyway, you four gentlemen have done omen's work, and we greatly appreciate that, and we want you to know that we thank you.
Yes,
And then we will invite you up to do some more work.
If I might ask, the town administrator, just if.
Yeah,
I may.
go.
I know originally the intent was that, you've been engaged for a year? Has
Little
been-
over a year, yep.
For a year, but there's more work to do.
Oh, there's a lot more work to do. When the board originally accepted the motion, it was for the governance committee to have a sunset clause for this annual town meeting in 2015. But the great work they've done, there's certainly a lot more that can be added. They may need a break for a few weeks.
Well, I guess my issue is, I mean, I know that I've spoken with Mr. Gray just on bylaws that you know need revamping, and there's, I think, a number of things that we haven't touched upon that I think, I personally, you know, echoing Dick's comments, I think that some work has got done over the last year that is almost decades old in terms of what needed to be done, so that, what would be necessary for, would we have to actually have a motion to renew the governance committee?
Yes, we can go back and have you amend the original motion you took almost 14 months ago and extend them for a period of time.
Are they a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen?
Yes,
So it's within our authority to extend their,
penance.
can I make that motion as of now?
it's not on the agenda.
Yeah, it's not on the agenda.
Why don't we put that on the agenda for next
Excellent.
Tuesday?
If anyone would like to speak against it, they can show up
Welcome
next
to come up.
Tuesday.
That's right.
All
three of them
Maybe come right up, your whole committee that you have, Jim. And believe me, I was not thanking you with the idea of pushing you into a new term. But
I was.
I'm thanking you for all the work that you've done in the past, because you've put in some huge hours. At an early hour in the morning. So we greatly appreciate that. Okay. Mr. Gray, how would you like to start it off?
Well, Mr. Ward, since you've already introduced the members of this committee, I don't need to go through that tonight for you folks or the folks at home. But most especially for those who may be watching at home, I think a few words with regard to the Governance Committee and its purpose are in order. As you know, the resolution which gave birth to the Governance Committee now nearly a year and a half ago charged it with the responsibility of analyzing the structure of town government with the idea of making recommendations to the BOS as to how best to achieve the most efficient and effective use of town resources, all with an idea towards improving operational and financial sustainability. The Governance Committee has met every other week consistently for 2 to 2.5 hours for now nearly a year and a half in a determined effort to fulfill its mission. Unlike other boards and committees in town which focus on a specific subject area, for instance, the School Building Committee or the Conservation Commission or the Planning Board, the Governance Committee was never intended to be a single issue or single subject committee. The portfolio it has been asked to carry has been broad, and accordingly its discussions have been far-reaching. We have gone back in time to understand the history of why things have been done in this town and the reason why they have been done that way. We have also tried to peer into the future so as to anticipate the needs of townspeople and their families going forward. Needless to say, the commitment exhibited by these members of the Governance Committee, including yourself, Mr. Ward, when you were with us, and the energy which they have expended in these efforts has been considerable. Further, they have never allowed themselves to become captive of any group or faction in town, and certainly are independent of any attempts to influence their votes by anyone in Town Hall. Anyone who knows these gentlemen sitting to my right, and also you, Mr. Ward, understands that they are independent thinkers with very strong opinions of their own. Now, prior to this evening, the Governance Committee has appeared before the BOS twice before. On a third occasion, it conducted a public information session in these very chambers. During this time, it came to a vote on 15 different initiatives, which it reported to you and the public. Each of these votes was unanimous, something I think that all of us take great pride in, because these folks come from very, very different sides of the political aisle, and over time have disagreed with each other, often vehemently. We understand that the votes that we took in coming together as a committee on some of these issues were highly controversial and would change the way town government had operated and has been operating for decades. For instance, we recommended appointment of the treasurer tax collector's job going forward instead of submitting that position to election. We recommended consolidation of the DPW and the Town Facilities Department. We also recommended consolidation of the various inspectional departments at Town Hall. We formulated a new police chief selection and reappointment policy. We identified a serious issue with the water in Town Hall and have banged the table to try to get proper allocation done for improving that well water, not only for the folks who work in town buildings around here, but also who live in back at South Shore Housing and Carver Housing. We also recommended that we have town meeting before elections. So these are just a handful of some of the initiatives that came from the Governance Committee. There are many more. I need not go through all of those, but I think just getting a flavor for those that I've mentioned gives you an idea as to the heft of the discussions we've been having over the last year and a half. Tonight, we come before you to report our final 6 recommendations, and as before, these are all unanimous recommendations. First, currently the post-employment benefit liability of the town, which consists, as you know, of payments to pensions and health benefits, has been estimated to be roughly $39 million or so. And it is increasing as time passes. The Governance Committee believes that the town urgently needs to be looking at ways to reduce this liability, or at the very least, to stem its ever-increasing financial exposure. To that end, the Governance Committee supports a bylaw allowing for a reduction in the town's contribution towards employees' health benefits from the 75% which it has been paying to 50%. This for any employee hired after or retiring after June 30, 2015. Now, 2 points need to be made here. First, this will, on the basis of the present mathematical calculations, save the town approximately $5 million on its OPEB liability. Second, the Governance Committee strongly opposes any change in the 75% contribution which the town has been paying to currently retired town employees. The Governance Committee recognizes that those folks now retired have come to rely on their health care being paid by the town at the 75% level. We believe it would be unfair to change this on them now, especially since most of them are no longer in a position to go back to work somewhere to make up the difference, and to ask them to pay that difference on their modest fixed income or savings would be burdensome. So in the end, the 75% contribution rate paid now for many years for currently retired town employees, in our view, constitutes an implied promise by the town, that it will not attempt to reduce its commitment to these folks after their many years of public service. Second, the Governance Committee supports the passing of a bylaw which would require all town departments to have a balanced budget prepared no later than 75 days before town meeting, with final budget to be voted on by the BOS no later than 30 days before town meeting, and further that any changes to budget requests inside that 30 days be made on town meeting floor. Now, allow us, the members of the Governance Committee, to speak frankly to you about this. It came to our attention that the budget for the school committee, or the school department, I should say, has not been finalized. Further, it was apparently, for a period of time, the intention of the school committee and the superintendent to meet a few minutes before town meeting commences to vote on their final budget. Now, the Governance Committee, ladies and gentlemen, makes no judgment regarding the specifics of the school department budget or the expenditures or allocations it may wish the school committee to endorse. Moreover, the Governance Committee also recognizes that in the past, some boards and committees have met just prior to town meeting to take final votes on various initiatives. Nonetheless, we firmly believe that making major financial decisions for the town a few days or even a few moments before town meeting is to occur is inappropriate governance. Transparency is undermined when this happens. Suspicions increase. The competency of all of our public servants is questioned. Bottom line, it is simply unreasonable to expect folks at town meeting to digest a multi-million-dollar budget without appropriate study and consideration. Hence, our strong recommendation to you that a measure of fiscal discipline be enforced on all town bodies responsible for financial affairs by requiring them to submit a balanced budget, again, no later than 75 days before town meeting, with final budget to be voted on by you folks within 30 days of town meeting, with changes to be made inside of 30 days to be done only on town meeting floor. Third, it has come to the attention of the Governance Committee that a petition will be presented to town meeting, which would limit the ability of a citizen to serve on more than one elected or appointed board or committee. As this petition so clearly bore on issues of governance, we spent some time attempting to understand whether such a limitation on service was appropriate. To that end, we learned that there are 38 folks who currently serve on more than one board or committee, including some elected officials. Additionally, there are now at least 15 openings on various boards and committees. I say at least 15 because some boards and committees have a maximum membership number, such as the Carver Cultural Council and the Business Development Commission. So if all of our boards and committees in town were to be populated up to the maximum number of seats available, there would be 72 vacancies. However, let's speak realistically. We would suggest that the following scenario be considered. If the 38 people who are currently serving voluntarily on more than one board or committee were limited to just one board or committee, the passage of this petition would immediately leave open 53 seats, because remember, there are now 15 openings. The total number of serving members on boards and committees in Carver is 219. if 53 seats were to be vacated, this would amount to 24% of all seats. Of course, this would give rise immediately to issues having to do with quorum. And many of these boards and committees are already meeting with minimum numbers and are struggling to get to quorums when they do meet. We all know that one of the great challenges these days is to encourage citizen participation, especially at local levels. We have an election coming up. It's an uncontested election. Nobody else is running other than the incumbents. So all of us have listened over the years to pleas from the Board of Selectmen and the Town Administrator's Office for volunteers to step up. This is one reason why we recommended adjustments as to stipends, which I will speak to again in a moment. This petition, this citizen's petition, would worsen an already difficult situation. It would also deprive us of some experienced people who have the time to give back to our little town. So we conclude, ladies and gentlemen of the Board of Selectmen, that this petition is retrogressive and, quite frankly, terribly wrong-headed. We recommend that the Board of Selectmen take a vote against the passage of this petition. I mentioned stipends a minute ago. I addressed that issue the last time we were here. Let me quickly recap. We know that sitting where you folks sit is not always an easy chore. Public service and public servants these days are frequently denigrated, ridiculed, and mocked. So we focused on the issue of examining stipends through the lens of proportionality and fairness. And to that end, the Governance Committee undertook a canvass of 20 different surrounding communities, from Abington to Whitman. And what we discovered in some instances was quite illuminating. For instance, in the town of Carver, the Planning Board is the most highly paid board at $1,400, nearly double the stipend of the Board of Selectmen currently. Most of the 20 communities that we canvassed pay no stipends to their planning board at all. Carver, of all the 20 that we looked at, pays the most. By comparison, the Board of Selectmen is underpaid when we looked at other communities that pay their boards of selectmen. So it was our collective view that as the prominent and preeminent policy-making board in town, with critical financial responsibilities, the BOS stipend should be increased to the level that we recommended, which was $1,700 per member in 2000 for the chairman. We arrived at this figure by looking at other communities and also after consideration of the fact that in approximately 2008, the Board of Selectmen voluntarily reduced its stipend by 50% due to economic conditions. So our recommendation would basically restore the Board of Selectmen stipend to its previous level with a very small bump. The Planning Board, and I had a nice discussion about this with the chairwoman, understands the reasoning behind why the Governance Committee actually is recommending a modest reduction in their stipends to bring it again into proportion with what our recommendation is as to the Board of Selectmen. And finally, we also recommended very small stipends for approximately half a dozen or so boards and committees in town that have important fiscal and legal responsibilities. Bottom line is that the total amount of the stipend increase is approximately $8,000 for FY16. Now, we understand that you folks obviously can't vote on your own stipends, but I thought it was important again to speak of this tonight in public session so that not only your memories could be refreshed as to our reasoning, but also so that the folks at home in advance of town meeting could begin to consider this. Fourth, in keeping with our discussion of issues having to do with committees and boards, we did a little housekeeping along the way. we recommend that the following committees, whose time has come and gone, be disbanded by vote of this board. The combined Police and Fire Station Building Committee, and also the Pond Bylaw Committee. At our urging, the Planning Board has already voted to disband the Medical Marijuana Bylaw Committee, and as I understand it, they will have on their agenda the next time a vote to disband the Solar Bylaw Committee. Further, the Governance Committee has met with various members of the 4 committees in town which have very nearly the same membership, similar names, and analogous missions. These are committees that have everything to do with things historic in town. These committees tend to meet on the same night, one after the other, and the ones of which I'm speaking are the Historical Commission, the Historic District Commission, the Lakenham Green Committee, and the Atwood Marcus House, or Marcus Atwood House trustees. We support the passage of an appropriate bylaw with regard to these committees that would allow them to consolidate under one banner. As I said, most of these folks are, I should say a substantial number of them anyway, I don't want to say most, but a substantial number of them seem to be a member of one or more of these committees. So if we can consolidate and then allow the consolidated committee to appoint subcommittees if it wishes to discuss issues having to do perhaps specifically with the Atwood House or with Lakenham Green, they would be empowered to do so. And also to the extent that they would need to keep books separate, books that have been kept separate up till this time and may still need to be kept separate given the nature of their missions and the earmarked donations that they might perhaps be receiving, then they would be required to do that. So as I understand it, Town Council is in the process of drafting an appropriate bylaw for everyone's consideration on that point. We have met, as I said, with at least a half a dozen members of these various committees at this point, and I know that they will have to meet again before town meeting, these folks, to decide how they would like to proceed given our recommendation. They seem to be generally in favor of this idea of consolidating. Fifth, it has come to the attention of the Governance Committee that the Building Department has struggled since the previous Board of Selectmen voted to make the job of the Building Commissioner part-time. And I say struggled because there's a lot of work there. The current Building Commissioner is well qualified and very diligent in her job. We're lucky to have her. She's doing the best she can with 18 hours a week, and that's the amount that she's allowed to work. However, when she assumed her position, she was left with a number of projects which needed to be reviewed, 150 emails had accumulated that needed to be answered, inspections had to be scheduled, and of course, new projects and plans needed to be studied. To say that she probably felt a little bit like a one-armed paper hanger might be an understatement. The Governance Committee is of the opinion that the conduct of this office and its delivery of services to the public is a core function of town government. And to that end, we voted to recommend that the town administrator try to find money in his budget for the hiring of an assistant to our current building commissioner. Now, I know that the number that was originally placed in the budget for the assistant was in the nature of about $2,100. And after listening to the concerns expressed by the current building commissioner and the rest of the members of the building commissioner, that amount, to his credit, was increased to $7,500 for an assistant. However, this money will not go far, and the building season is upon us. The building commissioner anticipates a significant increase in the workload of her office due to structural issues having to do with the difficult winter which we have just gone through, and this help actually is needed now, this last quarter of fiscal year 2015. Accordingly, the town administrator has promised the Governance Committee that financial assistance could be offered this quarter through the Selectmen's budget line item for FY 2015 and in 2016 as well, as the situation warrants. So we recommend that a close eye be kept on this situation and the Board of Selectmen be updated periodically, perhaps quarterly, by the town administrator and/or the building commissioner as to whether the duties of her office are able to be discharged on a timely basis, and if additional funds will be necessary to be applied from the Selectmen's budget line item. Sixth, the Governance Committee recommends that the position of elected constable be abolished after their current terms all expire in 2016. Now, currently, the town has 3 elected constables and 6 appointed constables. We also voted not only to abolish the elected ones, but also to reduce the number of appointed ones from 6 to 3. Now, constables are charged with the responsibility of serving legal papers on individuals, businesses, or the town. Their authority is to do so is limited to boundaries within the town of Carver itself. Based on what we have learned, it appears that elected constables are largely inactive these days. The Office of the Town Clerk has advised us that the fees which they have collected, which are supposed to be reported to the town, are minimal, anywhere from $5 to $165 a year. Those are the ones that are reporting, and of the 9 that we have right now, only 3 have reported. The other 6 have not. I don't know whether this is because they haven't been very busy or because this was a requirement that they were not aware of, but when we asked our questions and did our due diligence, it seemed that it was more likely than not that they have largely been inactive and not been generating any fees or minimal fees. The reason for us having 9 constables seems to go back to days in the town when we had a 1 or 2 person police department that was stretched. And so constables were necessary to fulfill the role of serving these papers, a role now that is less necessary in view of the fact that we have a much larger police force, and we have a very active Plymouth County Deputy Sheriff's Office that is allowed to serve papers in any town or city in the county of Plymouth. Accordingly, reducing the number of largely inactive constables now from 9 to 3 and abolishing the 3 elected positions seem to us to be appropriate. The Governance Committee did reach out to the 3 elected constables, and we heard from all of them. One of them told us, quite frankly, that he had been thinking about this and believes that it's no longer necessary for constables to be elected in the town of Carver. That was Mr. Farquharson. The other 2, one of them clearly indicated that he felt that 9 constables for our little town was too many. The third person was opposed to any change in the current system. We say the position of elected constable, ladies and gentlemen, is a relic of a much earlier time in the history of the town of Carver, and recommend that you adopt our recommendation that all elected constables' terms be allowed to expire in 2016 with no further elections of constables thereafter, and that the appointed constables be reduced from 6 to 3. I should say before I leave this topic and close that one of the advantages of going to an exclusively appointed constable position is that as part of the appointment process, we'll be able to do background checks on these people. If they're running for office, we're not allowed to do that. We don't know who we're getting. Secondly, we also reduce potential town exposure, liability, if we don't have elected constables any longer. So these are 2 other substantive reasons which drove our decision to suggest to you folks that the elected constable position should be abolished after 2016, with the understanding, of course, that when it goes down to 3, that the town administrator's office consult with the police department to make sure that the people who are requesting appointment have the appropriate backgrounds. And so now, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our journey. The Board of Selectmen resolution, which gave birth to the Governance Committee, states explicitly that it shall dissolve upon the conclusion of the 2015 town meeting. You and the public will see us there reassembled one more time. So the sun is indeed setting soon for us. A few final words, if you'll indulge me, just another moment. It has been my great privilege to sit in on these meetings of the Governance Committee for the better part of the last year and a half. Although as chairman of the committee, I have been responsible for steering the ship. At no time has the voice of any of these gentlemen been disregarded, and as any good captain knows, the performance of the ship is only as good as the crew. And boy, did these gentlemen ever row hard for our town. From time to time during our meetings, I found myself sitting back in my chair and allowing the conversation to just flow around me. I remember thinking so many times how serious were the issues we were examining and how respectful and insightful the commentary was. These gentlemen who come from such very different sides of the political aisle and who in the past, as I said before, have disagreed with each other vehemently sometimes, are such wonderful advocates for our town. I want you and everyone at home to know that. Finally, this. When we began on this journey together, a couple of these gentlemen I did not know very well. But I am proud to say that when I think of them now, one word comes to mind: friend. I shall remember each of them fondly. Good luck and Godspeed.
Thank you very much to the Governance Committee. Would any of my fellow selectmen have questions or comments, or Mr. Clark?
On the item number 2, when you talked about the timetable, the 75 days in advance and so forth, I was just curious, relative to the timetable that we've worked with you this year that you laid out, how significantly does it differ from what we've been working with in the course of this year? Or is it more a matter of adhering to the schedule and not allowing to get past the dates?
It mirrors step 3 and step 4 in our process, where we have a January 15th date and to finish step 4 by April 1st. So these we had picked dates and times. I think what we'll eventually do is go back and mirror this, so we back off the time.
I was gonna say, those are a little more liberal than the dates that I think the Governance Committee gave
The
us.
75 days works consistently with this.
But I think the 30 days, I think you were suggesting no substantive changes take place within 30 days to town meeting.
Correct.
So that it sounds like things would be pushed back a little bit, and I think we'd have to work with the school department and all the other town. It just seems like it's a little earlier than even what we've been working with there.
Well, starting with this is we're actually preparing step 1 starts on October 1st.
Well, I'm just thinking, like, we haven't even voted the town department budgets yet as the Board of Selectmen, and town meeting is less than 2 weeks away.
And that's correct, because we were, according to the existing bylaw, that was supposed to be done on January 10th. And our document here says January 15th. We weren't able to get all that information until much later, where if that had happened on time, we would have already voted and not be under the crunch we're in right now.
Okay, so you don't think there's any significant changes, just more making sure we hit the dates
Correct.
than anything else?
So I think there's
Okay.
some slight modifications, but nothing substantial.
Okay.
If I could just add to that. Again, I think that the Governance Committee was dismayed that some of the budgets were still being hashed out so close to town meeting. And these are big numbers that people need time to consider and to reflect on. And we felt that this was not an appropriate way for townspeople to intelligently consider what they should be voting on or not voting on at town meeting. So we felt that giving the 30-day date for final budgets to be approved by you folks, and then allowing the town to consider that during the ensuing month leading up to town meeting was appropriate. I suppose exceptions could happen where, some allocation is felt to be needed within the 30 days, but that's something that we felt firmly should be taken up at town meeting floor. So this is a way to kind of hold people's feet to the fire. We don't want major decisions being made too close to town meeting before people have an opportunity to really reflect on them.
And I guess I would just add that I'd like to see perhaps the warrant tied to sort of the same timetable, because there are non-money articles that I think it would be worthwhile to have cleared out at the same time that the budget article is done.
What we can do is, after town meeting, go back and update this schedule, assuming town meeting passes this change, to incorporate your comments.
So, go ahead.
Are you sure?
Sorry, Helen, what was that?
I
Do you
can't.
want to translate for her, Mr. Clark?
Yes.
The town has been waiting for this day, right?
The town has been waiting for this day,
But I have to say this.
but she has to say this.
I am running again because of the positive direction this town has taken, and I so enjoy being part of this group. And I have to say, I believe a part of the positive direction this town is on is because of the governance committee and the courage you've taken to bring forth such important decisions that this town has had to make. And you've done it in a non-partisan way, and you guys have all come together and worked together. And I think it's all trickling around the town. And I just want to thank you. But I do have a question on the last point as well. Just curiosity. Are these paid positions, the constables, will we be saving money? Is the only reason because this way we will be able to do criminal checks on them. I understand that 9 in this size town, we just don't need that many, but in the difference between the elected and the appointed.
Well, it's not only for the purpose of doing background checks, but also potentially to reduce the exposure of the town for liability purposes. If they're elected, arguably, the town has greater exposure, in my view, than if they're appointed. So that would be another reason. And thank you for the comments. Let me just say this. I kind of steered the ship, but all the credit goes to the other gentleman who sat on this committee with me. And I wish all of you could have been a fly in the wall on some of these meetings that we had. I know a couple of you did attend. Obviously, Mr. Ward, who was part of us for a while, and Ms. Hewins came in. I think Mr. Yes, was also there. So I guess I have these moments too.
No,
Not a
no,
problem,
I was wanting to help you.
How many years
because-
have I known you? But these were, in so many ways, exactly what our civics teachers used to tell us about how town government and citizen participation should work. It's very special stuff. Of course, I'm biased, but it was really, really special, and also, as I hope you see after almost a year and a half, productive.
Good. Ms. Hewins?
Thank you. I have 2 things. Thank you for the time, too, that you've been putting in. My first question is also about your second recommendation. I wanted to know, first of all, is the school department and the school committee aware of this recommendation? Yeah, as of right now, because I know this is the first time I'm hearing it myself, so I just didn't know
No.
whether they knew.
We have had no contact with anybody on the school side, and we're not necessarily targeting anybody on the school side. This was an issue that came to our attention, granted, because the school committee apparently had indicated an interest in wanting to meet just before a town meeting. And that's what sort of focused us on this. But, we look at this as sort of a global situation. Anybody who has their hands on the purse strings for the town should be held accountable to a firm timelines, again, so that people can be better informed and have an opportunity to reflect and study for a reasonable period of time before town meeting.
And no, and I appreciate that. The reason I ask is because I personally am not that familiar with the processes the school committee goes through, what comes down the pike from the state in terms of their timelines and deadlines, and in some ways, it's possible that what they are required to do or what they go through was one of the reasons we had a later town meeting in the past. I just don't know. What I'm saying is that I think, I'm not sure I can pass a judgment on this without hearing them explain their situation. Were there extenuating circumstances that we just don't know about? Will that happen every year? If that happens, what then? What do we, so if we don't have any information from them, I'm not sure how I can.
And thank you for that. I guess my feeling is that if you're within 30 days of town meeting, you better have it together.
Well, again, there might be something.
That's at the 11th hour.
There might be something, and I don't know. I'm just imagining this, since they're heavily dependent on state funds. I don't have any clue if this is the case, but there might be something that actually they need to wait for towards the end of the fiscal year because of the way the state does something. I don't know. I'm just saying I need a little more information.
Well, the
from
fallback
them.
on this, as you heard us say, is that if something happens within that final 30 days that requires an adjustment, that can be taken up at town meeting. I mean, that in the end is the ultimate arbiter and decision maker.
Right.
So I think all your points are well taken, and I'm sure we'll get some information, or you folks will get some information after our recommendation tonight about whether, there are things that happen within the final 30 days that would materially affect their budget. And I emphasize materially, not little things, but significant things.
And
Thank you.
Sarah, if I could, I was going to mention that I think when we get to the other side of town meeting, it'd be worthwhile to sort of convene a representative from the schools and the Board of Selectmen and finance and so forth, and just sort of review what the new timetable will be. I mean, we should be talking in July about what the schedule's going to be for next year. And then relative to your point, I understand your point about the flow of funds, but I know there are several towns, including Duxbury, that finished their town meeting in March.
Right,
So
and
that-
that's right. But again, I feel like we're talking about someone who's not in the room. And
No, I understand, but I'm just saying that my impression is that if other towns are able to move ahead and have their town meetings, but I think it's
It may
really,
be.
the important thing is just making sure that everyone's in the, invited into the same loop and
Correct.
understands what we're working toward, and,
My other, I'm sorry. Is it- Well,
Yeah,
I was
finish
going to
up.
make a different point, and we spoke about this a little bit earlier, Stephen. This suggestion about actually adding on to the Historic District Commission's, to their powers and duties. And what I had brought up to you earlier was that it seems to me that instead of rescinding the town's acceptance of Chapter 40, Section 8D, which was creating an appointed historical commission, that maybe that's the thing we should keep, since it has a broader purview. There are historic districts in town, but they're not that big. And so it seems to me that by combining these committees, which is not in and of itself a bad thing, but if you combine them into something with that limited purview, the Historic District Commission, then they can only, I mean, we do have buildings that are historic buildings that aren't in a district, and historic cemeteries and other historic sites. So I was suggesting to Mr. Gray that we might want to change this so that the thing that's actually being abolished is the Historic District Commission, and then have all these other committees subsumed under the larger, broader framework of historical commission.
And I think your point is well taken. I know that town council is busy working on drafts of these warrant articles. I've seen a couple of different drafts go through on the same article or the same warrant already. And I suspect that this one will go through another draft, and your comments will be well taken.
If I could just comment on that, I think it's Article 11, I think, is where these governance articles are.
Yep.
And I think, Sarah, what you're saying would not be legal to do. That's why town meeting has drafted it through the Historic District Commission based upon their review.
Would not be legal to do?
Correct, because you
What
need
do
to
you
have
mean?
the historic district, as written, has the authority to, I'm just gonna pull my thing out here. Has the authority to add these additional components.
Okay.
And so they drafted it to be in compliance with, here it says Article 11C, under, to amend the additional duties of the Historic District Commission so that they become the umbrella for all the other programs, but it has to be under the Historic District Commission.
So you're suggesting that Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 8D, the Historical Commission, would not allow these committees to be added to their powers and duties?
Suggesting that the way town council recommended it is the way that they felt it was legally allowed to be done to create the over-encompassing component. I think other towns have done it this way too.
So how do they have jurisdiction out of a historical district?
Because it's, in that section there, it assigns that responsibility to them in Article 11.
Yeah, I don't see that. I mean, I just don't see that particular assignation, but.
We need to put wheels on this microphone.
We're working on the final wording. Perhaps, Sarah, you could actually talk with the attorney between now and then.
That
if
would
you
be
want.
great.
I was
Yep.
just going to suggest that perhaps a further conversation with town council
Sure.
might
Yep.
be appropriate.
I'd be
I
glad
think
to
we're
do
all
that.
on the same
Trying
page.
to skin the same cat.
I think we're all on the same
But
page
that's
here.
a horrible image.
Yeah, it is, especially since I have 3 cats at home.
I'm sorry,
Thank you
that's
very
the same, I think we're all working towards the same solution.
Yeah,
Great, that's much better.
Yes.
leave the cats
Yeah,
alone.
I think we're all on the same page here. It's just the mechanics.
Yep, yep.
So I encourage you folks to speak to town council and get this taken care of.
I'll do that. Thank you.
Through you,
Okay,
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Dunham?
Get wheels put on his microphone if we could. Okay.
Oh, I get ready to speak, and you're not gonna, because, just because you couldn't remember my name, you're gonna pass it off to John? Well, first off, I would like to thank all the work that the governance committee has done. I did have sat in a couple of those meetings before, and they do get quite in-depth, and it's a tribute to your dedication to the town, everyone on that committee. I have a few questions. I'm looking at Article 11. Basically, that's supposed to be covering all the governance committee recommendations, correct, Michael?
That need to be voted on by town meeting.
Okay. So you're saying that the group...
Absent the constables one. I think the constables one still has to be written up.
Okay, so but that one does have to go before town meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, well, that was made, because I noticed that, that wasn't there. And I noticed, B, you didn't bring this up. I think you might have mentioned this last year, but this is the one that's having us not making appointments to various offices, boards, commissions by someone who just lost in an election.
That's true. We did speak to that the last time.
Okay, so that's why this is showing up here, because,
Yes.
so, okay, that's all I had.
Through
Thank
you,
you.
Mr. Chair, just one last
Maroney, yep.
point.
Ms. Maroney has one last point.
Am I that bad?
You should have brought a beer to lubricate her throat tonight, Mr. Clark.
You'd think they would learn, right? No, we were just talking about the 75 days, and I just would like to point out that I don't think you were just talking about the school committee. That was just an example, because I do recall as far back as being on the finance committee that we would be getting data the day of the meeting from many different town departments. So am I not right in saying that you were just giving that as an example of that it's so important to get these finances in before?
If I could speak to that, Ellen. The Finance Committee has always been challenged by the time frame put
Yeah.
before us getting up to town meeting. Part, what's stated in our bylaws, we're supposed to put basically almost like a memorandum together of our opinion on the budget. And we've got so many parts still moving days before town meeting. We've never been able to do it, to be honest with you. And I can show you booklets from Halifax, Whitman, Wareham. There is a booklet that goes out and online, probably 3 weeks, 30 days, I think I've seen it before town meeting, that lists the budget, the warrant articles, explanation of the warrant articles, vote by both Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen. It's all labeled there. So that's what we're talking about, is basically control of the town finances communicated effectively to townspeople before town meeting. And it covers budget, it covers free cash. What are we doing with free cash? What are we borrowing? What's capital outlay approved? Everyone's financial information needs to be disclosed, be transparent, and for the finance committee to offer an educated opinion as to what direction we would recommend for the town. We've met on Monday nights before town meeting because something just came up and we just found out that the budget changed substantially. So-
You'd be meeting a half hour prior.
Exactly. Thank you.
And I guess, to
Clark?
that point, I guess, Michael, when I was talking about the timeline, to meet that timeline, to do what John suggested, March 13th, we should have been done with this process. If our town meeting is on April 13th, we should have had everything done, voted, warrants, everything ready to go as of March 13th. And I think that's the timeframe we need to develop and work into. So I think getting together in the summer, maybe the snow will be melted by then, get a little committee together to just review the time frame and get it set up, and so it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone along the way. And then all the committees can adjust their time frames to get things done to meet those deadlines.
Yeah, understand that the governance committee is not casting aspersions on any one committee or board. But this habit that we've fallen into, where we're putting together big numbers at the 11th hour, is, in our collective view, counterproductive. It doesn't help people understand the budget, study the budget, or give people enough time to get their heads wrapped around the numbers. It's hard enough for you folks, but for the average person who's suddenly getting a big number thrown at them with all the various line items, it's hard stuff if we're doing it all at the 11th hour. And that seems to have been the habit that we've fallen into, as you've just heard from Mr. Cotter. So transparency is the key word here. We want everybody to understand how competent you folks are and how diligent you are, and this kind of thing gets, these kinds of qualities are questioned when we can't get our act together in sufficient time. So that's what we were focused on as a governance committee, and we think these deadlines will kind of force the issue on people quicker and allow them to get to the nub of their issues faster, so that everybody in town can understand where the money is going.
May I, to our town administrator, the schedule that we're talking about, you're talking about, is similar to the schedule we have now, except we don't have any teeth in it.
Correct.
So that's what we're talking about doing.
Yeah, now the teeth in this, so to speak, is
Is a
that
bylaw.
is that if this passes, then any movement on the budget within 30 days of town meeting is going to have to get taken up on town meeting floor, and the change is going to have to be defended there.
Okay, good. I'm just thinking of history over the last couple of years, getting to this point. It seems that this makes a lot of sense to me. This past year, we moved the town meeting up a couple of months, from May to April, or maybe it was even June, a portion of the town meeting. So we're moving it up. So that created a little bit of a shake-up in our schedule. In the year before, our town administrator was new on the job, so now it's time. Okay, we appreciate that suggestion. Any other questions? No. Any other comments? Mr. Grimes, go.
Kind of hoping to pass this, just, it was great back and forth here. Just a quick comment on the stipends. I just wanted to get an idea where, our thinking was on this. I think that, as everybody knows here, the stipend is really principal. It's pretty well meaningless if you do the math. But, I think that when the selectmen reduced the stipend, for instance, before, because of budgetary, I can appreciate why they did it. But I think that there's another side of that. These stipends within this, what we're recommending with this $8,000, really gives a little bit more credence to how the town appreciates, what you all do. And I think no one's really running to the bank, and I'm sure it's not even coming close, I remember, to cover expenses. But I think, in principle, it might seem like some sort of tokenism, but it really is I think, a token of appreciation for what we get from what the people give back to the town, like you do, and like these other committees. So that's really what our thinking was there. It's not as if that we're all going to go down and play Keno with the local, because believe me, my stipend never covered the bets or the beer. But we understand that it's appreciated, and I think that's why I don't think it should be difficult to sell this to people in the town. It's not really any type of greed or any type of self-centered, I guess some sort of path that we think we're taking. No, it's just really an appreciation. And believe me, we're still, for the stipends the town of Carver pays, even with this amount, at the bottom somewhat of the food chain. So I just hope the town people appreciate that, because we certainly appreciate what you all do, and I think they will too.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. I'll just, I think that this is gonna be something that I will be looking for the town meeting to vote on. I don't know as I'm gonna be voting on it myself.
No.
But
We're not asking.
yeah, no,
Believe me.
your thoughts are good, and I really appreciate that explanation for the folks at home. Comment.
I really thank you for thinking through that, and I know you're talking about all the boards and committees. But I have to say, I'm not speaking for us, because we can't speak for what you're proposing for our stipend. But it's just one piece I just don't have the conscience to vote right now this year, only because of all of the debt that we are about to incur and how we're trying to manage through this school. I just think it's just bad timing, so.
It might be, but we wouldn't want you to vote.
No,
It's
I
up to
know,
the
I
town.
know.
Yeah, you know.
Well, exactly, but
Yeah.
I'm just giving you my thoughts on it.
Sure. No, I think you're correct in that, but I think it's an opportunity for the town at town meeting to step up and vote for that. I mean, we would recommend it, obviously, but
It's a nice
and when I
gesture.
understand that, yourself, the board, and the other boards are probably not even concerned about it, but I think looking from a third-party position, I think that the town should understand just, how to appreciate just what you all do.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of concur with Helen for the same reason, but slightly different reason as well. And again, I'm not speaking about the stipend for myself. I went for many years with no stipend as a planning board member, because I was also an employee, same with being a selectman. So obviously wasn't doing it for the stipend. But Board of Selectmen stipend aside, my feeling is either everyone who volunteers should get some sort of stipend, or maybe no one should. Because who decides which one is doing the most important work? And, what are the criteria? I suppose I know you've looked at other towns, and I get that. Sort of the quasi-legal boards and that sort of thing. But, I don't know. Volunteers are really important, and they're really hard to come by. And I understand the impulse to want to sort of reward them somehow. But all of those, every last one of those committees matters to me. They're all doing important things. I'm not sure I could say one is doing more important stuff than another. So I guess I'm not sure where I stand on that, but I sort of feel like maybe they should all be rewarded somehow, because as Jim pointed out, it's more symbolic than anything. Even if it was $50 or something, I don't know, $25.
Our decision in selecting the boards and committees that we did was based upon the frequency of their meetings, and also based upon their portfolio. If they had a significant fiduciary and or legal obligation to discharge, then we focused on those. So for me to answer that question, I would say we looked most carefully at those boards that had important fiduciary and legal responsibilities to the town. Your points are all well taken. I'm not sure that there's any good time to recommend this. If we say this year is not a good time, will next year be any better, or the year after? This board reduced its stipend voluntarily in 2008. Here we sit today, 2015. And this issue has not really been addressed for going on to almost a decade now. So rather than punt, I think that at this point we should, and did, as a committee, take up this issue and voted the way that we did. We, of course, recognize that you can't vote for your own stipends, and I'm certainly prepared to speak at town meeting. I'll make sure that I wear my flak jacket when I do. And
You've been hanging around Grimes way too long.
well, he loaned me his flak jacket last week, so I should have had one this morning. But in any event, those are the reasons why we identified the boards that we did, and keep in mind also that we reduced one of the boards. This had gotten really, from a proportional standpoint, really out of whack, where the planning board, although it discharges very important public duties, was getting paid almost twice what the average member of the BOS is being paid. And we thought that that should be flipped around. So there were policy reasons, and also, as Jim says, sense that, you know, these contributions should be appreciated. And nobody's going to get rich on this. Nobody's going to retire. Nobody's going to go down to Disney and, you know, have a great vacation on this money. This is something, though, that we felt should be addressed now instead of continuing to wait for the perfect time, because we know that there's never going to be a perfect time for something like this.
Would this be retroactive to previous board members?
Yeah.
Nice try, Jim. I got it, brother.
Still then.
Okay, is there any other discussion? And,
Just our thanks, and when we have a discussion about the continuance of your committee, I'm sure we'll take your issues, concerns, and considerations into mind.
thank you very much for coming in and
Thank you.
presenting
And
to us.
in all seriousness, thank you for all the effort. We
We'll
know
see you at the sunrise.
We'll be there one more time.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay, now we will move on to the town administrator's update. Discussion and vote on town department's budget,
If only he were here.
if he was here.
Next week, we're gonna vote them up or down. This is just the form.
So it wouldn't,
No, if you can make it to get well for next Tuesday,
Yeah.
next Tuesday.
Mr. Malinowski, go for it.
All right, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman,
Tonight,
Excuse me, yep, point of order?
Helen is gonna excuse herself because she's not feeling well.
Oh, no,
So
no.
that, and I'm not
Please.
comfortable being this close to her. So, if the committee would indulge her to leave,
no.
and we do hope you feel better, because it's obvious you're not feeling well.
No, we, for some reason or other, know how you feel. You can hear.
and I don't think anything, the remaining of the night is critical, so.
We're not
We're simply
voting on
approving the
articles,
warrant
we're just,
tonight. We're not, we'll be
just
voting the
putting-
articles next week.
Voting the articles
So-
next week, right? So,
We're just putting them on the warrant this week.
Yes.
right, so you guys all feel comfortable that the next few
Take your
votes-
squeaky voice and go home and get some rest.
We hope you feel better.
There you go.
I'm sorry we ruined your voice during executive session.
It was worth every second. Thank you.
okay. Good night, Ellen.
Thanks, feel
Good
better.
night. See you Tuesday.
And Mr. Malinowski, go for it.
okay, as we go through these articles, once you go to vote the entire warrant to go to print, so to speak, and to be publicized, that vote needs to have a contingency that would allow for any additional clerical or legal issues to be incorporated in the final version, with the approval of the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. We don't anticipate changing any content per se, but there may need to be some additional language modification made, based upon, additional comments that are still coming forward. So, again,
You
it's,
want that motion?
when we get there, I'm just,
All right.
you know,
Yep.
there may be some editorial issues that need to be modified. I'm just bringing that to your attention ahead of time.
You walked us through this last week, so I guess maybe on this walkthrough, just point out any changes from what we went through, maybe?
I will do that. Okay, Article 1, the annual town report, nothing different with that. And again, stop me at any point. We have the unpaid bills in Article 2. Article 3 is the supplemental appropriations. As far as a proposed motion, I'm leaving that blank at this point because we are still looking at the alternatives for transferring the funds.
Do you think by next Tuesday you'll be plugging in where the monies will be coming from for the funds? Is that the
Certainly
hope?
by the following Tuesday at Monday of town meeting, I will. We will be doing our best to have most of those plugged in by next Tuesday. I can't guarantee that, but our intent is to have all of the motions finalized by Tuesday, so that you can vote on those.
And we certainly have precedent where we waited, where we weren't sure of exact budget numbers, waiting to town meeting to actually put those in if we have to.
But again, that is left blank at this point.
But this is, again, going back to the previous discussion, this is something that it would be nice if we were doing a month ahead of time, as opposed to a week and a half ahead of time, to have it all buttoned up.
Correct.
And we will do that next year.
We will strive to do that.
Yep.
Any additional questions on Article 3? Hearing none, moving on to Article 4. Article 4, now again, there's been some slight modification to the wordings of these. I'm not gonna bring that on unless it's a major issue, but this is, the same numbers are in here for Article 4. And again, this is the allocation of the free cash and appropriating that where needed. Just to call out one distinction, you will see that there are 2 items that are designated as FY16, so those will be available in FY16. The remaining funds will be transferred immediately upon approval of town meeting.
Just a quick question. I know that it's possible that Article 3 might have to be supplemented to some extent by free cash, which might affect these allocations. Does the fact that you might have a number listed here getting published that might have to be amended affect what we show here?
The answer to that, I would say, is no, because I think we'll be able to solve Article 3 without touching free cash. But you bring up a good point. When a number is put into the motion, again, I just want to repeat this
You can
again.
always
If
go
it's
down,
in
it
the
can't go
motion,
up.
you can always go down, but you can't go up.
Right, okay,
Okay, so that number is a maximum not to exceed that number.
okay.
Any questions on that? Article 4? Okay, Article 5. Article 5, we are working on 3 different solar projects, and this would be to have town meeting's authorization to allow and grant the Board of Selectmen the authority to approve pilots or payment in lieu of taxes or tax agreements for these properties. These have not been negotiated. They don't have to be negotiated. All of these that we are moving forward with would be in the same ballpark as existing pilots we did last year, which are by far the highest in the state. Any questions on that? No? Article 6. Article 6 is our budget for FY16. It's broken down into the 3 parts, which is the organizational chart, the wage and salary pay scale, the wage and salary classification plan for elected and non-union employees, which will be Appendix B, C, D, and E. Appendix F is what you normally see in the warrant, which will be in the back pages, which will be the summary by department, and then by group, such as general government, public safety, human service, culture and recreation, and shared budget expenses. You will have a line item for the school budget at 21,954,223. This is, just for clarification, $30,000 less than what the $2,000 less than what the current school budget is that they approved last week. I did talk to Mr. Gray about this, and they're going back to look at that figure again, understanding how our town finances work. Part C is our special funds, the OPED fund, Town General Stabilization Fund, where you see the amount is different between the net levy and the net limit. This allows Meg to put in any, when we get our final state aid number, if it changes from where we've programmed things, it allows her to put that money, that excess levy directly into the town's general stabilization fund. And usually it's a small number, but it just allows that to be done. Our capital stabilization fund, North Carver Water District, and the Water Betterment Debt Stabilization Fund. The Water Betterment Debt Stabilization Fund, this is betterments that have been paid to the Water District. You may recall that in years past, that money was just put into the operational base, which is allowed by DOR, but the betterment is a payment of what the cost of the infrastructure is. So to put that into the operational base is really not good accounting, although it's approved by DOR. Putting it into a designated fund allows us to amortize that and release that as debt payments come up. Otherwise, it just increases our debt load. If you spend it now, then you won't have it to pay for the debt when the debt comes forward. Then we have our enterprise funds for the North Carver Water District and Cranberry Village. Followed by proposed motions. Any questions? Moving on. Article 7, Capital Improvement Plan. I don't recall, I think this is the same format that you saw before. Yes, it is the same format. Now, in here, a couple things to point out. Part A is in essence the cash, if you will, the money we're taking out of our existing capital stabilization fund. It also is including the remaining $37,000 out of the capital building stabilization fund. So that fund will then be brought down to zero, and everything will focus out of our capital and debt stabilization fund at that $2.6 million. Part B is to appropriate funds to bond the fire equipment, the 3 fire engines, and engine number 4. This still needs a final bond council review, so this potentially article could slightly change based upon how they review it. But again, it'll be the same thing.
Mr. Chairman, on this one, I'm assuming that when you say repair engine 4, it's not the current engine 4. Because, and the current engine 4, not worth rehabbing, but it would be the current engine 2, which is the oldest of the 3 frontline engines.
We're gonna do a good job on that antique. No, you're correct. It would be for the new engine 4.
Yeah, I just don't want people to think the old engine 4 that resides currently up in Station 2 is the, spare piece. That's the one that we're talking about rehabbing.
Correct.
Okay.
That'll be going to pasture soon. Part C is to borrow the funds for doing the school project, which would include the roof, the mechanical systems within the boiler room, and doors and windows, subject to receiving funds from MSBA.
Don't have to have a dollar figure in there?
The dollar figure is it's in the motion, I know, down below. I have to go back, check on that, but there was a reason why.
That is in the motion, yeah.
Yeah, the motion does have the sum of $7,430,000.
I don't know know off the top of my head why town council didn't put it there. They did
You might want to
draft this
double
motion.
check just to make sure that that wasn't an oversight.
Yep, but this is their article, they drafted it. I will check on that. Okay, moving forward, Article 8, you heard at our last meeting on the CPC report and recommendations for their 8 projects. The only item there is, and here's a change in Section 2. They want to have monthly updates versus quarterly updates because they meet monthly. Capital outlay doesn't necessarily meet monthly, so that's why they're just quarterly. That's a change. We still have some additional language to put in here for the informational summaries. We're gonna try to flush those out between now and when we put this out to print. Article 9, the revolving funds. I don't believe there's any change in that since our last meeting. Article 10 was what Serped presented about the aggregation of electricity. Article 11 is a modified language from the other day. This, is in direct, this follows what the Governor's Committee just recommended. You will see that as it relates to the 75, 60, and 30 days, they took section 4.3.4 out of the town bylaws and modified that. So it's modifying and adding teeth to that existing section.
And on the Historical District Commission section, there'll be some additional conversation with council just to make sure we have it
Yeah,
correct.
I'd like to do that, yep, definitely.
And we're gonna be adding a Part D in here, which is the removal of the elected constables, reducing the appointed to 3, allowing the elected to continue to serve out their term, and that when I make the appointments, to do it in consultation with the police chief. So that'll be added to section Article 11. Moving forward, Article 12. Ron, I still need to just have a conversation with you and Meg tomorrow on this, or Meg wants to have a conversation with you. But this is the article that's been presented, and we just need to finalize what section and how do we do it, with cash on hand versus the other piece.
Yeah, okay, and did you ever have council check to see whether or not it was even necessary to have this?
I did ask that question, and this is what they came back with.
Okay.
Article 13, or land transfers to the Board of Selectmen. That would give you the authority to sell them. Article 14, this is the zoning articles that Mr. Hunter presented on Tuesday, which goes on for many pages. On the bottom of page 22, I believe, is Article 15. This is the 5 non-money petitioned articles that and some of these the Governance Committee spoke to. Article 16 is the money petition articles. There are 5 of those. These are consistent year over year.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Everything on Article 15, we're going to be voting that as a single article, or are we going to take up each section separately for a vote?
Well, that would be up to the discretion of town meeting. We put it together so they can vote all 5 together, up or down, or they can take them one at a time.
Okay. But that'll be determined by the members of town meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
But they are all petitioned articles from the same petitioners. That will allow the petitioner to speak once on all of those articles. And then move on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any questions, Article 16? Article 17 has had some modifications. Why don't I go through those modifications and then let the two members speak to this article?
Okay, yeah, give a little background as to why this article is even being presented at town meeting, some of the rationale and.
Correct.
Okay.
So, what you have printed in your document, Section 1 remains unchanged. Section 2, at the end of that, the date is changed to 2025. This section locks in all existing retirees and future retirees that retire before the 2025.
At 75% contribution level from the town for their health insurance.
Correct.
Okay.
Section number 3 is going to be a new section that, effective on June 30th, 2025, after June 30th, 2025, the contribution rate in 10 years will then go to 50/50 for future retirees.
Anyone retiring after June 30th, 2025, it goes to 50%.
Which section is that? I'm sorry.
That'll be
That
the
is a new Section 3.
Oh, okay.
There is going to be a new Section 4. It is going to read something similar to this. Upon separation from the town of Carver employment for retirement, and a retiree may elect at that time from separation to continue their participation in the town-sponsored healthcare insurance program into their retirement, subject to the terms and underwriting conditions of the town-enforced insurance providers at that time. The eligible individual who fails to exercise his or her election opportunity at that time of retirement will be deemed to have waived their participation rights.
And in layman's terms, that means
If they don't go ahead and take the insurance right there and go to work for somebody else, they can't then come back to Carver 10 or 15 years later and say, oh, I want my health insurance
if they
too.
don't retire from the town of Carver, they're not eligible for contributions to their health insurance.
Correct.
Basically.
Yep.
They need to retire from the town of Carver.
Section 5 is deleted, and Section 6 becomes Section 5. And those are the modifications for that, again, subject to additional legal modifications.
And that was voted unanimously
Yes.
after a significant discussion.
Unfortunately, we're not allowed to comment.
Do you have anything else you want to say on that before I go into the next?
Mr. Vice Chair, you.
No, it was a very healthy discussion among the three of us, and and every person in there was was wrestling with our obligation to the town and taxpayers and OPEB, along with what was fair to existing employees. And I think we arrived at a good compromise.
And just so the public understands why we're even having to deal with this, it was discovered when we were originally trying to go from Gateway to Mayflower, that there were certain requirements of the law which were never adopted by town meeting. And so we needed to come up and figure out the best way to go ahead and, protect the people that have already retired, much like the governance committee was talking about at the beginning of our meeting. As Mr. Gray was going through that, I was thinking to myself, I wonder if he had ears in on our executive sessions, because it's pretty much the same thing. And we wanted to make sure that this really pertained just to the retirees, not only current retirees, but those that are within a certain number of years, with the expectation that they'd have a certain insurance rate, that they're protected, and also to protect the town so that those further out would be having a reduced rate, and therefore going ahead and saving the town money when it comes to OPEB. So Is it perfect? Probably not. But I think there's enough there for everybody to acknowledge that, there was something for everybody, yet no one side got everything they wanted, which is probably the best description of a compromise. If everybody can go out a little happy and a little mad, then I think we've done our job. It certainly wasn't done quickly. We've been wrestling with this now for a lot of extra executive sessions, and hats off to Elaine for having to go ahead and sit back there and listen to us for notes and whatnot, and for the work Michael's done. But I'd definitely like to thank Helen and Ron for we've had some spirited discussions, even poor Helen. I think she lost what little voice she had left on tonight's session. And we apologize for taking a little longer so that some of our meetings didn't start public session quite on time. But so a lot of work and thought has gone into this. So I just wanted to really let the public know what was coming down. I know there's some misconceptions out there that have started to show up on a couple of Facebook pages. And all three of us were pretty much determined and went into it, protection of current retirees, just as Mr. Gray stated much more eloquently than I could, to protect their health insurance benefits in that 75-25 split.
And just to piggyback on what Alan said, actually, by taking this action, future retirees are better protected than they would be if we didn't take the action, because a recent decision by the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts established that boards of selectmen and city councils have the right, the city of Somerville changed the contribution rate for all employees in retirement from 90% to 60%. And it's entirely within our purview. If we wanted to, we could go to 0%. So by enacting it through legislation, it would take special legislation to have any future reduction in benefits for employees on retirement pay. So I think it was a good compromise. And thank Alan for bearing with me.
Not a problem.
And I think we all thank you for all the work that you've done, because it's been morning meetings, afternoon meetings, evening meetings. You've put a lot of time, you three members, and I'm not commenting on the issue at all, just the fact that you work very hard to come up with something that you consider fair. So, thank you.
And I'll just emphasize one more time, the proposed legislation would grandfather current retirees at their present rate of 75% being contributed by the town and 25% by the retiree, and those that retire over the next 10 years. Okay, and Article 18 is deleted.
Okay.
That's what we have at this point. And again, I would ask any motion the board makes that it's subject to any additional modifications that we need to address, plus any language clarifications, and any of those would be at the discretion of the chair.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous, 4-0, Elaine. Okay, no discussion on department budgets,
Unless,
other than,
I
we
still
pretty
keep
much
it on here, we can wait to Tuesday to vote it, but again, I haven't heard any comments from any members, so.
I mean, we've seen everything,
much
right?
put that
This
to
is
bed for now.
what we spent all
Get
day
voted.
Saturday here for, wasn't it?
okay. All right, we're at Board of Selectmen comment period. What's your pleasure? Somebody want to start?
Filling in
Everybody-
for Helen, I'll just mention that the Common Core discussion is going to be at the Lady of Lords on April 10th at 7 o'clock. You should call Helen. I don't have her cell number memorized, but you can call Elaine at the Selectmen's office, and she will forward you the cell phone number or put you in touch with Helen Maroney if you're interested in attending that meeting. And that's basically all I have.
Thank you, Helen.
You should have been talking like this, though.
Mr. Clark, you have anything yourself for yourself? I'm not doing
No, I will defer
Good,
to you.
Dick. That was good.
Sarah?
Thank you. I just wanted to remind people about town meeting, Monday, April 13th at 7 PM at the high school auditorium. Your vote matters. And also the town election. Even though they're all uncontested races, it's important, I think, to vote. And we would appreciate your being there. And that is Saturday, April 25th, from 8 AM to 6 PM.
I think town meeting, is town meeting the 6:30?
6:30.
I beg your
6:30.
pardon. Thank you. Town meeting on Monday, April 13th is at 6:30, not 7.
Okay, I'm glad you reminded me. Mr. Dunham?
All right, I've got two things. One is real easy, uncontroversial. The other one, gonna take a little bit of time here, but that's all right. First, I want to wish everybody a very happy Easter, and that you get a chance to go ahead and spend time with your loved ones on this very special weekend. Now, the second item I have really came up after I had a chance to, I was on the town website, which is working just fine, thank you, on Monday, and I went to see what the school committee's latest meeting was in their agenda, and I noticed that they are going executive session into bargaining. And it got me to thinking a little bit that a lot of times we don't know the results of their bargaining or their votes till well after anything is said and done. I have found out that there's a Mass General Law 150E, Section 1. Does everybody have a copy of this, Michael? Or did we come up with one? Oh, I have them here. So if you could go ahead and take one and pass it down, please. I'm just gonna read the pertinent part, which is pretty much what's highlighted. Any county, city, town, district, or other political subdivision acting through its chief executive officer and any individual who is designated to represent one of these employers and in the act in its interest in dealing with public employees. In the case of school employees, the municipal employer shall be represented by the school committee or its designated representative or representatives. For this purpose, the chief executive officer of a city or town or his designee shall participate and vote as a member of the city or town school committee, provided, however, if there is no town manager or town administrator in a town, the chairman of the Board of Selectmen or his designee shall so participate and vote. I know that's something we have never done in town, but considering the school committee has such a, responsibility for such a large budget, I really feel it's important that the Board of Selectmen have a representative on there. What I would ask, though, before we adopt it, is I'd need clarification, and I'd ask Mr. Malinowski to do this, for that last sentence where it specifically says the town manager or town administrator would be the first person to do that as a representative of the Board of Selectmen, and then the chair, if those are not available, the chairman of the Board of Selectmen or his designee shall so participate and vote. I'd like to get a ruling to see if we're bound by that order, or if the chairman so chooses, we can go ahead and he or she could be the representative or denote a designee. Now, I know this is not on the agenda, but the fact that they are meeting on April 7th, I thought that this was important enough to bring up tonight under the auspices of subjects not reasonably anticipated within 48 hours for the chairman. So I apologize for the short notice on this, but your pleasure, or any comments.
I'd be more than happy to have one of you serve on that versus me.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. But we need to get clarification if it's allowed.
And I would add that I think it's important to work with the school committee and discuss this. And
Absolutely.
not just sort
Well-
of spring it on them that, by the way,
Absolutely.
we're here, and be escorted in by a couple of policemen.
Yeah.
No, I'm not disagreeing with that, but I mean, it's a right that and actually, if you read it, it's something the town should have been doing
Should do.
for many, many years.
And there may be some town meeting vote that we don't know about that did something or other, you know,
There could be, I
Yeah.
kind of doubt it, but,
well, we don't
no,
know.
nope, yeah, I agree.
This next meeting you're talking about, Alan, is
They're meeting April
negotiations?
they're going, meeting April 7th to go into, at least, I believe it's the teachers' union negotiations.
Have you spoken to them about this by any chance?
I have not had a chance, opportunity to, no, but before I even started them, I wanted to get a feeling from the board first. It's not something I'd want to go, hey, I had this idea, and then come back to the board again.
It's come up before, right? I think I've had conversations with the superintendent where,
That's what I meant, maybe a
Okay, I've never heard of
conversation
it.
with
It's been-
someone, or the
Yeah,
chair
I-
of the school
it might have
committee
been-
before doing it publicly.
God, it had to be fairly, I thought sometime in the fall it came up. Maybe it was when you were out, when you missed a meeting or two or something, that I thought we discussed it at some point, that we have the right to have some representation. Did this actually say we have a vote?
Yes.
Because I didn't think we had a vote, the way I understood it.
Yes, in my previous town that I was in as a town manager, I sat as the sixth member of the school committee and was involved in the negotiations. And at the end of the day, we had a very successful negotiations, but it allowed for bringing in the town component into the process, because particularly the selectmen are the only ones that are technically authorized to deal with healthcare, and that those need to be approved and coordinated with the Board of Selectmen.
So the idea was that by having a member of or a part of the Board of Selectmen on there, the communication was just better relative to how it works.
Yeah, we had a great working relationship.
Yeah, I mean, we had actually talked about this. I had actually anticipated it, so I'm glad Alan brought it up, because I just didn't realize they were already starting into the process. So, Alan, since you brought it up, would you have any qualms about having a conversation with Liz about working together?
No, I'd have no qualms about it. Like I say, I have no problem contacting both the chairman and the superintendent initially of what we're looking at, and want to take advantage, as our right, say, make sure they don't have major heartburn. I'll phrase it nicely.
I was going to say, as opposed to getting it right, as much as
Right.
just in the spirit of cooperation.
But I'd still like to say, we still need to go ahead, and I would prefer if it would be the chairman or his designee. It's, as a first option instead of the town administrator, town manager, because, we're trying to smooth some things
Well, I think the town
over.
administrator has
No,
already,
he's already stated.
he's
he
already
would-
punted
Yes,
at this point.
he'd much rather us do it that way, so.
So when would this meeting be
think it
again?
was
The
a quick
7th,
kick on
did you
Thursday.
say, Alan?
Well, see, that's just it. I'm gonna have to,
well, I mean, even if we miss a meeting.
right,
I
because
wouldn't- I wouldn't
right now,
focus on-
I don't believe they're anywhere close to going to a vote.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so, not if they've
So-
only had one meeting.
But is there some action that you want taken here, or?
Well, I don't think we can do anything now. I think the next step would be
Can we
perhaps to have
move along?
contact with them, and then maybe
Yep.
report back as to, in the spirit of cooperation.
Cooperation.
Yeah.
That
Would
sounds
we
good.
be able to do that by the time we meet next Tuesday?
That's cutting it awful
That's
close.
cutting it
I
close,
would, think we might have to wait till our second meeting in
In
April.
April, yeah. Which
I
would
think there's
be
time.
after town meeting.
Unless it's the fastest negotiation in
Right.
history.
And I don't anticipate that happening, but
Okay.
we have town meeting come up. We've already put in a lot of extra hours, and I know they are too, so.
Okay.
All right.
So why don't I take that as an action
We
item?
won't hurry it, but we'll call that a future agenda item for the second meeting in April.
And if I do get something earlier,
Okay, you
I can just do it under selectmen comments again, just not for a vote, but just to bring you up to date.
Yep.
okay.
We could just put it on the agenda till you're ready to vote on it. Just let it carry.
Yeah, we've done that before. If we're not ready, we just postpone it to the next meeting.
Okay. Anything else, Alan?
Nope, that's it.
I guess my only comments tonight would be that I would like to see everybody have a happy Easter and holiday weekend. And so that would be the extent of my comments. All right, the next thing, we have an emergency kind of item or request. It's for relay games for kids. It's, pardon? And it's Relay for Life or for the greater Plymouth area.
A cancer fundraiser.
Cancer fundraiser, okay. Very good. What's your pleasure?
I move that we approve the request and also waive the usage fee.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of, any other comments? All those in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous, 4-0. All right. Minutes. I've got some past minutes here. We don't have the 24th minutes tonight with us in our packet, or do we? No.
They were emailed
Yep.
out.
Okay, what's your pleasure on the minutes for March 24th?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of March 24th.
Second.
Okay, any omissions or such? Okay, all those in favor of accepting the minutes of March 24th, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous.
We
Elaine?
put off the minutes last time because Helen hadn't had a chance to read them, so we probably should add those to get them approved at the next meeting.
Which ones do you mean, Ron?
The ones that you had here.
Okay, all right, yep. All right, executive session, what did we decide on that? No.
Because we did so much
Okay.
work
That's
in the
public
front,
comment
at the
period.
front
All right,
end.
so, public comment period.
Peter, got a public comment?
Okay,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
all those in favor of adjournment, say
Aye.
aye. It's, and so